So I really do have just a few words to say. Teresa had not written her Dharma talk when she came down with this bug, and she did give me a few notes, which I'll go over, and then we'll have a chance to talk about the second precept, ourselves together. A little review for those of you who maybe haven't been here the last couple of weeks or are new here. We've been talking about the 5 precepts in Buddhism, and they're about ethics, wise action. The Buddha referred to the 5 precepts as great gifts, saying that anyone who adheres to these 5 guidelines gives freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings. This means that those who practice pose no threat to another's life, family, rights, or well-being. And being motivated by a sense of our shared humanity and living by the precepts can be seen as a gift. We live in the world with all people as family. And just as we would not harm our parents or children, when we refrain from harming anyone, we offer them the gifts of kindness, harmlessness, safety, of generosity and ease. So if you missed the last couple of weeks, here's a reminder of the 5 precepts, what they are. Not causing harm to other living beings. This is the fundamental ethical principle that underlies all the other precepts. And not taking what is not freely given. As stealing is an obvious way in which one can harm others. But if we take the meaning of the second precept more expansively, it can include taking advantage of others, exploiting them, manipulating them. The third precept is avoiding sexual misconduct, not causing harm to oneself or to others in the area of sexual activity, and avoiding false speech, a crucial element in our relationships with others. And abstaining from drink and drugs that cloud the mind. And I think all of us have seen other ways of stating this that primarily emphasize the clouding of the mind. So there's not a single course of action that will be right in all circumstances. And instead of speaking of actions being right or wrong, we are asked to reflect and investigate and to consider whether an action is ethical and skillful or unskillful. This requires working with ourselves on a deep and intimate level and honestly investigating our own motivations and thinking deeply about how our actions will affect others. Here's what Gil Fronsdal has to say about this kind of investigation. It uses the mind's capacity to observe what is happening in the present moment carefully and wisely. Investigation is a relaxed, alert interest and should be done without clinging or aversion, without wanting any particular results. It is a natural faculty of the mind that comes to the fore when the mind is at ease. And the process of investigation does not entail discursive thought. In fact, investigation becomes more penetrating as the mind becomes quieter. Turning on a light in a dark room and seeing the objects in it doesn't require much thinking. Investigation can be understood as turning on the question, what is this? And letting the light of that question reveal the particulars of the present experience. So tonight's focus is on the second precept, which in a Theravadan statement is stated, I undertake the training rule to abstain from taking what is not given. The more modern version says, to the best of my ability, I will take only what is freely given and vow to practice gratitude and generosity. And this has been further expanded by Thich Nhat Hanh. This says aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression. I vow to cultivate loving kindness and learn ways to work for the well-being of people, animals, and plants. I vow to practice generosity by sharing my time, energy, and material resources with those who are in need. And I am determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. So what is not stealing? If we look at stealing specifically, society's laws usually define theft as taking something of value without the consent of the owner. But there are types of theft that are not necessarily covered by criminal codes. We might think it's okay to take a pen or a couple of paper clips from work. We rationalize why it's okay to break the rules. Everyone does it, we won't get caught. It's not illegal. If a winter storm is coming, what's our response? Dashing to the grocery store and buying enough food for 2 weeks? What perspective are we holding with this sense of hoarding? To practice the second precept, we realize that not taking what is not given is about more than just respecting other people's properties. By wording the second precept, not taking what is not given, the Buddhist tradition presents a higher standard and greater clarity for ethical behavior than simply not stealing. From this standpoint, things have to be clearly and freely offered before we take something. This means not relying on ambiguity, deceit, force, exploitation, or intimidation to acquire what belongs to others. The second precept, like all 5 of the precepts, speaks of a training in refraining from not taking what is not given. And from this training, the counterpart to this precept, an expression of generosity, arises. What if we were to take on this precept for a week, to just notice as you move through the day how and where this precept has relevance? So that's as far as the talk got. Teresa gave us a couple of questions to contemplate. I have one thought about the precepts of my own that I'll share. In a talk I heard a long time ago by Gil Fronsdal, also by Gil Fronsdal. He was talking about the 8 Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. And sometimes you hear the Eightfold Path stated with the word wise action, right speech, and sometimes you hear it with the word right. I think right grates against us somewhat because it implies a certain sort of strict ethical and moral code. But he said the way to think of right is like having the right tool for the job, like the right hammer for what needs to be nailed together. And that really spoke to me. If what we're about is walking along a path that we hope will lead to less suffering for ourselves and others, and our own heart growing and being more compassion for ourselves and others, then we need to have the right tools to do that. I think that's a useful way to think of the Eightfold Path, and it struck me just this afternoon when I thought I need to say something about the precepts, that is also a useful way to think of the precepts, as simply having the right tool to suffer less, to help others suffer less, to see our life in the world with a deeper wisdom, and to grow our hearts. So, some more tools in our tool bag on this path. Teresa gave me some questions, so why don't we, next time, why don't just talk with your partner. And I'll pass out these pieces of paper.